Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar, and the quote that George chose for us this week led us to explore why connection can be scary, smiling at strangers, and taking kindness to the fourth dimension. Hope you enjoy the episode.
So, the quote for this week is: "There is no such thing as a small act of kindness. Every act creates a ripple with no logical end." And this is by Scott Adams. This one I've taken a lot of notes on, and I went through loads of different ways to try and explain this first bit, because I think this concept of every act creating this ripple with no logical end is something that you can kind of have an intellectual understanding of, and you can also have a more feeling understanding of. So if you just imagine a smile, and I kind of think of that as like the most quintessential act of kindness. It's like a very small act that shows kindness to someone else. And that can create a little moment of connection. And it might seem kind of insignificant, just this little moment of connection. And this quote is talking to someone who just thinks of that as a small little connection, because in fact, it's a lot more than just a moment of connection. It's actually an eternity of connection, because the kindness that you share with someone is experienced in the present moment. There's the smile and the feeling that someone gets from being recognized and feeling the kind of positivity going towards them. But that kindness that they feel is going to end up being expressed to other people in their life. So one piece of kindness can travel to many different potential present moments. So just imagine that when you smile at someone, rather than using numbers like infinity, which are kind of abstract, let's just think of it as 100. So you smile at someone, just imagine that that moment of kindness could end up being experienced again by 100 people that this person comes into contact with. So that simple one action that takes you a fraction of a second can end up going on forever, and that little unit of kindness can expand throughout time. It's just really incredible. I spent a little while just meditating on this and just thinking about this, and I would really recommend doing that. Just really try and wrap your head around it. It's something that can't fully be understood because we can't experience the dimension of time. We can only kind of conceptualize it, but it's a really beautiful process to go through, to just think about it and just have wonder and excitement for how many people you could touch with just that small act of kindness.
I think from listening to what you've said there, the thing that actually comes to mind is reflecting on free will. So, in the reflection on free will, the basic idea is that every single thought and action is a response to the exact conditions that preceded it.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes kindness. And
Mm-hmm.
so kindness is almost like from the beginning of time, there's been this domino effect of kindness
Mm-hmm.
that's rippled through life and been
Mm-hmm.
passed on through all of humanity's time span, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can kind of think of it. So it's not like you're even the originator. It's like you're the torchbearer and like
Mm-hmm.
passing that on,
Yeah.
which I quite like that idea because it makes it about something much bigger than yourself as well. It's not even that you started it. It's just that you've inherited this kindness. One thing that I was thinking of was that kindness is it's like connection manifest. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the union or connection that we feel as people when that smile comes, when that wall goes down, when we really feel like we're present with someone and that they're offering
Mm-hmm.
kindness. Kindness is the manifestation of feeling connected. If
Mm-hmm.
we feel really connected with other people, then kindness is the natural action. It's the natural act to smile or to
Yeah.
give or to be generous or
Mm.
yeah, it is a very beautiful thing.
Mm.
And it's lovely to talk about, really, because it's like an energy, and it is
Mm-hmm.
encouraged or lit up by reflection as well.
Mm. Well, this actually ties in perfectly to the first thing that I thought of when I read this quote, was that it reminded me of this time when I was cycling back from my dad's house along the seafront, and it'd been quite a long cycle. I was it was a bit wet, and I was zoned out, and just kind of listening to a recording of Alan Watts speaking, and he was inviting me to imagine a field of grass and the morning dew on that grass, and to think of one of those dewdrops and how that dewdrop reflects the entire scene within itself, but then how each other dewdrop is reflecting everything, including the reflection of itself within every other dewdrop. And within that, every reflection of every other reflection of the dewdrop. And they're all in perfect synchrony. Anything that moves in that environment is perfectly and seamlessly reflected in every other element there. And I just had a really profound moment of realizing that, and it just blew my mind of it was the best way that I'd heard explained, that inextricable connection of everything, how everything is part of the whole, and how any distinction of foreground and background and drawing around something of this is an individual dewdrop, this is a piece of grass, this is a field, all of these artificial lines that are drawn around things are kind of just done for simplicity, and they have plenty of use in our day-to-day life, to think of events as isolated, or to think of even matter as having clear edges. But really, it's just completely whole and completely connected. So yeah, that's the first thing that I thought of when I read this.
Yeah, I also thought of that one. It
Did
is a
you?
really nice image. Yeah. The thing that from you saying that I wanted to bring in is just also reflecting on what the opposite is, or the dominant view, because I think it's really interesting to get a sense of that. So the other extreme of this interconnectedness, the other end is this sense that the world is indifferent, or that actions don't really have very much consequence, if any, especially actions that we take in our own home, for example, or just when we don't feel like anyone else is watching or there or anything like that. We feel that there's a dominant view that these actions are completely isolated, because we might not have a subtle enough idea of how interconnected actually everything is. And I was just thinking about when I get into states where that becomes my belief, as in when I let it slip a bit and I'm not considering what I'm doing that much, and I'm being a bit lazy and I'm cutting corners, say, or I'm not being so kind. My sense is losing that connection, or losing that, what we just like evoked with the dewdrop analogy. And suddenly the network goes down a bit, as in suddenly I become, if I invest in this idea that nothing matters and there's no consequence to anything that I'm doing, then the light of that network somehow goes down in my own experience to some degree, and I start to feel more deadened, because that feeling of connection is so good. It just feels so, I know we've mentioned it on previous episodes, but I get that sense of connection through looking at the stars and feeling very small but very part of this vast network. It's so beyond our conception of time and everything like that. And here I am, and I'm just this little speck as part of this. I'm like a little something on one dewdrop that's being reflected, or I don't know. which just feels so good to reflect on. And yet the opposite being this sense of real isolation and disconnection.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cynical views of kindness, and it can be easy to fall into it. I guess the worst one is that when you're kind to someone, you're basically inconveniencing yourself. You know, you're taking time out of your day to do something for someone else. That's kind of the implication, that you're losing something, or you're giving something away that you lose, and someone else gains something from it. And I think there's a few different levels to it. That would be the first. But then I think probably the more common one is like, oh no, you do something kind for someone, and you know, it feels kind to do something for someone else. But I think this is kind of the next level, which kind of takes it into the fourth dimension of time, where you actually see the ripple effects that action has.
Yeah, definitely. It's so liberating to come from that place, I think, of seeing the significance of action. Because it's not just kindness, you know, it's action in general. You know, if it's that's why in Buddhism there's such a, well, it's partly why in Buddhism that there's such an emphasis on ethics, is because there's a sense that actions have consequences. Even thought has consequences. We have a lot of influence, basically, a lot more than one would conceive of. And so it's super important that the intention of what you're bringing in is coming from the best place possible.
Yeah.
And I think kindness is significant because it is, well, there is something spiritual about it. And I mean that in the sense of it's kind of ungraspable, and it goes beyond the confines of our skin. Well, I have a belief that basically we are communicating in very, very subtle ways all the time, way beyond what we can actually conceive of. And there's a purity to an act of kindness, which is that thing of connection manifest. And I think the reason why even really small actions, kind actions, feel very significant is that they are tapping into this web that we've already talked about. And to take that further, you know, tapping into, I'm going full spiritual here, into maybe a source of life or something like that. It's that we, you know, we're all manifesting, and we are all animated by life, by something quite mysterious that is quite inexplicable. And I wouldn't want to label it in a way because I have no idea what it is, but it is mysterious. And we are all plugged into that. That's how we are animated, is this mysterious life force thing, right? And kindness and that connection that happens within kindness, I think it has its roots in that something that unifies us and shares, that we share, just in the fact that we are alive. It's almost like this portal to this incredibly deep root of things. So that's why I feel like even like I had it the other day, like I was on the bus, and I was really feeling quite self-absorbed, but in a I mean, there's always suffering in there, but I was suffering, basically. I was kind of quite locked into my own thoughts and ideas about myself and all this kind of stuff. And this woman with a baby on the bus, like the baby just got my attention and then smiled at me. And, you know, it's just, you can't help but smile. It's just like so beautiful moment, you know. And then the mum turned around and smiled at me as well. And in that moment, there was a shared humanity there. Oh, I'm not alone here. This person's alive too. That this being is alive too. And it's so obvious with babies as well. It's just this kind of life force that is there, that's so pure and young. And it's, yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but
No, it is such a beautiful thing, that those moments of connection, or I guess those eternities of connection, if you like. Like it feels like it really reminds you that you're alive.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of crazy that you wouldn't have thought you would forget that sort of thing. But you can just kind of get caught up in what you're doing and your concepts. And I was just eating some food and watching a video, and it was asking strangers to cook them dinner in their kitchen. That was the title of the video. And I watched it, and they were going around to these different houses and knocking on doors. And a lot of people were friendly, but for whatever reason wouldn't let them in. But eventually they found this really nice couple, and they invited them into their home, and these guys just cooked a meal and ate a meal with these people that they just knocked on their door earlier that day. It was just a beautiful little insight into these people's lives. Even from just watching it, I could feel a really strong feeling of connection, of something really profound and really human that was within that moment of these people connecting. Thinking about kindness has just really made me want to be kind and do more kind things, because I think that's what this quote is saying. It's a remedy for people who have a reason for not doing kind things, because there aren't really any good reasons for not being a kind person. There are excuses or reasons why you don't feel like it or whatever, but it's universally good. I pretty much can't think of any times where being kind would be a bad thing. Obviously, you could get something like being naive or being weak, being overly nice to someone when they're actually not being kind or don't have good intentions to you. But in general, if you are really being kind to someone, it's a good thing. It's all good.
Yeah. There really is no situation where kindness isn't a good way forward. I was on a Buddhist retreat this weekend just gone, and the theme wasn't on kindness, but there was such a sense of kindness through the talks that we were watching, and we had groups and stuff on Zoom afterwards to chat about the talks, and kindness was really running all the way through it. It really that felt like it was really there. And the takeaway from the weekend for me was really just asking the question of what is the kindest thing to do here? And what I really like about that question is it really covers all bases. It's pretty foolproof. There's some situations where the most important thing is to be kind to yourself, of course. So for example, today I was feeling really hyped for this episode, but then in the last half an hour before recording, I started to get a bit nervous about it, and I could feel a bit of frustration because it felt like one of those episodes where the energy of it's really important and it's about getting into a bit of a flow with it. It feels important with a topic like this. So I was getting a bit like, oh, that's annoying that my mood's changed, and like I feel a bit I'm not like feeling, am I going to be able to get into this properly and all that? But because of this mantra or something of like, what's the kindest thing to do? It was just like, I just had to be kind to myself, and the fact that, okay, that something's changed a bit here, and, I'll deal with it. It'll pass and it's cool. Like, it's fine. It's, not dismissing it, but just being like soft with myself about it. And actually, I'm really enjoying recording now. So it didn't stick around.
One thing that I think is quite common with kindness is a calculated kindness, where you kind of think selectively about who you should be kind to. And it's a natural thing that people can fall into, of just wanting to do things that benefit themselves. Obviously, people are going to want to do that. But even if you're selfish, it's still the wrong thing to do. This selective kindness of thinking, okay, what can this person do for me? So I'll be kind to them. Oh, this person is worthless to me, I won't be kind to them. Those things they just slow you down, because you can be kind to everyone. It's, like we said, a smile is such a small thing. So rather than trying to calculate it and be like, okay, so if I do this favor for this person at this time, then I can then I can ask them to do this and they'll do this for me. And then, trying to really plan things out. But if you just be kind in general in your actions and don't worry about how kindness is going to end up coming back to you as well, then you get the joy of being surprised by all of the kindness that comes that you didn't expect, because you weren't trying to plan out how someone was going to reciprocate. You're just focusing on those connections, those eternal connections that you can make, and just blasting out as many of those as possible. It's something to remind yourself of and to keep on coming back to and working on, and being a kinder person in your life and finding ways that you can express that as much as possible. A great first step is just realizing that anything that you do that's kind is a move in the right direction, and that you shouldn't be like, it's not worth it, or I did that little thing, but I mean, that's not really going to matter. No one's going to appreciate it. It's so much better to just keep putting them out there. And that's what I want to do more of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In Buddhism, then it's often put as metta, METTA, which kind of loosely translates as loving kindness. And why this word's quite helpful is it does actually stop that issue of self-centered kindness. That's not metta. You know, that's a different thing. So it's calculated kindness, or I don't know, there's got to be another way of putting it, you know, that doesn't even include the word kindness necessarily, because it is so it hasn't really got anything to do with that connection at that point. You know, it's just a calculated way of getting what you want. And it feels completely different to the real deal. So that's why a word like metta I find really helpful in regards to that. Also, I'm really interested in exploring what I'd put down to being the poverty mentality when it comes to kindness. Like there's a certain amount that I've got of it that I can only give so much, you know, that it is limited, because I get that a lot. I think I can quite easily get into a place where kindness becomes quite contrived. It's like there becomes a bit too many shoulds, or I really ought to be kind, or I ought to do it's not based on spontaneity or genuinely feeling moved to help someone or whatever. It's more of a sense of duty, or that I identify as a good or kind person, or people may see me that way, so I have to play that part, and therefore I'm going to act in this particular way, but actually my heart's not in it. And I think there can be fear in kindness, in true kindness, because you have to allow a certain amount of vulnerability in kindness. There's a softness to it, and an opening yourself up for it to be genuine, for you to really feel connected to the other person. I think you have to be open to a certain degree. You can't just be cool, collected, and just keep everything back and be kind. I feel like there's got to be a willingness, openness, friendliness there. And I can find that scary sometimes. If I'm feeling quite malnourished spiritually, emotionally, I feel like I'm really that it's a scarcity that, and I don't feel able to be open in that way, which is really interesting. So it's something I've really had to work on, actually, just trying to keep my heart open and keep putting myself in positions where I can feel vulnerable with people.
Yeah. It's kind of like say you're walking down the street and you smile at someone. You know, it is such an easy action to do, but you could also feel like, what if this person doesn't smile back at me? It feels like you've lost something, perhaps, like you've given someone something and they've just given you some weird look because they weren't able to receive it at that time.
Yeah.
So it's something that can be tricky, but I guess it's a habit like anything else. It's definitely, something that I want to work on. I think just the thing of just smiling at people as you walk by them is a really, like, I just find that so nice. Just a little smile, someone who's walking their dog or whatever as I'm walking around. And it's definitely something that I want to do more this week, at least. I want to have that as a focus and just kind of do more of that when I'm about.
Yeah. That feels like a good place to wrap it up.
Beautiful. Oh, I really enjoyed that, man. That was good.
Yeah.
So before Oscar reads out the quote for next week, don't know why I'm laughing. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Share it if this made you think of anyone that would enjoy it. You can subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And if you want to buy us a coffee, there's a link to do that in the description.
So the quote for next week is by Rebecca Solnit. The future is dark, with a darkness as much of the womb as the grave. It's from her book, Hope in the Dark.
That's cool.
Great. Well, I've really enjoyed this. And yeah, see you guys next week.
And what if they got any questions about the quote, though, Oscar? What are they going to do? Just write them to Santa. Send them to the North Pole.
If you've got any thoughts about the quote that I've just read out, you can get in contact with us through our Instagram page, which is knowwhatimean.podcast, or you can drop us an email. Our email is in the description of whatever you're listening to this on. And there we have it.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. See you next week.
Peace.